There are 40,000 bees on this honey badger right now, and he is not leaving. He has his head and both shoulders inside a hole in the base of a dead tree, and the air around his hindquarters is not air anymore. It is a solid moving mass of insects. They are on his back, in his ears, along his tail, and they are stinging him continuously. He has been in there for 6 minutes. He will stay for 5 more, and then he will walk out with a slab of comb in his jaws and 40,000 bees following him across open ground. He is not immune to bee venom. There is no animal on Earth that is immune to bee venom. He is working against a clock, and by the end of this, you will know exactly how long he has. Have you ever seen an animal walk into 40,000 stings on purpose? For food it could get somewhere else? Stay with this one, because the interesting thing here is not that he survives it. The interesting thing is that these two species have been redesigning each other for about 1 million years. And every single thing about how this colony behaves is a portrait of him. Here is the whole raid at 20 to 4 in the morning. He arrives at a trot, no hesitation, straight to the base of the trunk, because he found this tree 11 days ago and has been waiting for the right night. He did not find it by luck. He walks this ground every night, and he carries a map of it that nobody has ever been able to measure the size of. What he was waiting for was weather, a cold, still hour before dawn. He starts digging at the root plate, where the cavity is closest to the surface. At 3:42, the first guard bees hit him, and the colony wakes up. At 3:44, he is through, front half inside, and the whole colony is out. For the next 7 minutes, he does not react to any of it. He does not shake, he does not swat, he does not look up. He tears comb, eats what he can reach, and pulls out what he cannot eat inside. At 3:51, he backs out with a piece of brood comb the size of a dinner plate and walks away at a steady pace with a cloud around him 1 meter thick. 11 minutes, start to finish. That number is not a coincidence, and it is not bravery. It is the only number in this story that matters. His name here is Tano. He is a male honey badger in his 6th year, about 26 pounds, and he has been working this stretch of country alone since he was 16 months old. He is built long and low, with a skull like a wedge, a neck almost as thick as his head, and front legs that are mostly muscle, wrapped around heavy bone. His claws are 1.5 inches of curved bone on the front feet, built for digging and used for everything. He eats over 60 kinds of animal, and he will dig 30 to 50 holes tonight. He runs on a budget, with no reserve in it. A honey badger carries almost no fat, and he cannot store a good night against a bad one. He covers 10 to 20 miles between dusk and dawn, and most of what he digs produces nothing at all. Out of 40 holes tonight, perhaps 12 will contain something worth swallowing, and most of those will weigh less than an ounce. That is the background against which a nest full of larvae has to be judged. The famous thing about him is his skin, and the famous thing is true, but not for the reason most people say. It is about 1/4 of an inch thick over his back and neck, and it is loose. It hangs on him like a coat 2 sizes too big, attached at the neck and almost nowhere else. Against a leopard, the looseness is what saves him. He turns inside his own skin and brings his teeth to whatever is holding him. Against bees, the looseness is irrelevant. What matters is the thickness, and one measurement decides everything. A honeybee's sting is about 2 millimeters long. His hide is 6. A bee landing on his back can drive its sting in with everything it has, and it does not reach living tissue. It gets leather. You can watch 100 bees work the same square inch of his back and see him ignore all of it, because from inside that skin, it is not an attack. It is weather. 40,000 insects can pour their entire arsenal into the back of this animal and deliver nothing but pressure. That is not toughness. That is a hole in their weapon system that he was born into. The most dangerous animal in Africa, pound for pound, is protected here by 4 millimeters of margin. But look at his face. The hide over his muzzle, his lips, his eyelids, and the inside of his ears is thin because he has to smell, chew, blink, and hear. Those are the 8 inches of him that bees can reach, and the bees find them within seconds, because the head is what is inside the nest. He will take somewhere between 40 and 90 stings on his face tonight. By morning, his muzzle will be visibly swollen, and one eye will be half shut, and it will stay that way for 2 days. Watch what he does about it, which is nothing. He does not paw at his nose. He does not blink them off. He does not retreat 5 feet to clear his head and come back. Every second spent reacting is a second not spent digging, and the clock is the whole game. An animal that flinches at a nest leaves with nothing, and leaving with nothing still costs the same stings. So he keeps his face in the comb, takes the stings, and works. Inside the cavity, he is working almost blind. The nest is dark, the air is full of bodies, and his eyes are the least useful thing he owns in there. He works by feel and by texture, and the difference he is looking for is simple. Honeycomb gives and drips. Broodcomb is dry and firm and comes away in a slab. He wants the slab. His front claws break the comb off its attachment, and his jaws take it at the base, and the whole operation is closer to demolition than to feeding. Now, why is he doing this at 20 to 4 in the morning? Every documented raid on a nest by an animal like this happens in the dark, and it is not for cover. It is because a honeybee is a machine with a temperature switch, and at night the switch is off. A bee cannot fly with a thorax below about 54 degrees Fahrenheit. The flight muscles simply will not contract fast enough, and below that line a bee can walk, sting, and buzz, but it cannot take off, cannot chase, and cannot navigate. At 3 in the morning out here, the air is in the 40s, and the only warm place for miles is the inside of the cluster the bees are sitting in. They warm themselves by shivering, at a real cost in honey, and a cold colony takes minutes to bring enough bodies up to flight temperature. A daytime colony brings hundreds of flyers to a threat in under 5 seconds. That same colony, at 3:40 in the morning, brings its first serious numbers in about 90 seconds, and its full force in 8 to 10 minutes. He is not braver than the daylight version of himself. He is arriving while their engines are cold. Nobody taught him the temperature. He has raided nests in the warm part of the evening and been driven off, and he has raided them in the cold hour and walked away with comb. The cold hour worked, so the cold hour is when he goes. He is not reading a thermometer. He is repeating whatever hurt least last time, which over 6 years produces behavior that looks exactly like knowledge. So now look at the colony, because it is not a passive food source. It is the most sophisticated defensive organization on this landscape. A wild African honeybee colony in a good cavity runs 30 to 60,000 workers. The nest itself is a set of vertical wax combs hanging in the dark, and only part of it is honey. The rest is brood, eggs, larvae, and pupae, sealed in cells, thousands of them, packed and immobile. Guard bees hold the entrance permanently, and their entire job is to detect a breach in the first second. They are not looking for a shape, they are reading 3 things: carbon dioxide, dark color, and vibration. Every mammal that arrives at a nest exhales a plume, wears fur, and shakes the ground, and all 3 of those are triggers. This is also why his face takes the damage and his back does not. The plume comes out of his nose and his mouth, so the densest part of the attack forms exactly where his armor ends. And here is the mechanism that turns 30,000 individuals into one animal. When a bee stings, the sting tears out of her body and stays in the wound, and she dies within hours. What she leaves behind is not just venom. It is a chemical marker released from the sting chamber, an alarm pheromone with a smell like ripe bananas. That marker says one thing to every other bee that reaches it: sting here. A target with 50 stings in it is broadcasting an instruction that recruits hundreds more, and each of those adds to the signal. The colony does not decide to attack him. The first 10 bees mark him, and after that, the response builds itself. They are not defending a nest. They are painting a target and letting the paint do the recruiting. African bees are the extreme version of this system, and the numbers are not subtle. A European colony disturbed at the entrance might send out a dozen defenders and give up after a few meters. An African colony of the same size sends out hundreds, and it does not stop at the nest boundary. It will follow a large animal for several hundred meters, and in serious cases, for the better part of a mile. And it stays switched on. A colony that has been raided at 4 in the morning will still attack anything that walks past at noon. Anything. A tortoise, an antelope, a bird in the wrong tree, none of which have ever touched a nest. Now put the two sets of numbers together, because this is where the clock comes from. A bee delivers about 1/10 of a milligram of venom. For a mammal, the rough, lethal load is somewhere near 19 stings for every 2 pounds of body weight. For a 26-pound badger, that is in the region of 250 effective stings. A colony this size, at full mobilization, could deliver that number in well under a minute if every sting landed in flesh. Bee venom is not a nerve agent, and it does not need to be. It destroys cell membranes, dumps histamine in bulk, and at high enough doses shuts the kidneys down. Death by stings is not poisoning the way a snake bite is poisoning. It is a body overwhelmed by its own reaction to a very large number of very small injuries, except they cannot land in flesh. 95% of his surface is armor they cannot penetrate. So the entire fight collapses onto the front of his head. And there, the arithmetic is completely different. Only a limited number of bees can physically occupy his face at once, and most of them are busy hitting hide that does nothing. He accumulates effective stings at a rate of perhaps 5 to 10 a minute, not 500. His ears fold shut, and his eyes are small and deep set, which takes 2 more targets off the list. At that rate, the number that would kill him arrives somewhere between 25 and 40 minutes in. 11 minutes in the nest. 250 stings, somewhere past 25. He is not fighting a colony. He is running a stopwatch against one, and he leaves with more than half the clock unused. There is one more thing that gets repeated about him, and it deserves an honest answer. He has an anal gland that produces one of the worst smells in the animal kingdom, and it is often said that he uses it to subdue bees, the way smoke calms a hive. It is a good story, and it is not established. Field observers have reported him averting the gland at nests. Nobody has ever run the test properly, and there is no measurement showing a colony going quiet because of it. What is documented is much simpler. The cold, the hide, the 11 minutes. When a plain mechanical explanation covers all of the observed behavior, you do not need the chemical one, and you should not sell it as fact. What he actually came for is not what the story usually says either. He is not primarily here for honey. Honey is sugar, and sugar is useful, but this animal needs about 2 pounds of protein a day, and he assembles it out of items weighing an ounce. A slab of brood comb is thousands of larvae and pupae, and larvae are close to 60% protein by dry weight.
That one plate-sized piece is worth more to him than 150 gerbil holes, and gerbil holes are what the rest of his night looks like. He takes honey because it is in the way of the brood. At 3:51 he leaves, and he does not run. Running throws his balance off and drops the comb, and the cloud follows him at his speed anyway. He walks about 200 yards to a patch of deep sand he has used before. He puts the comb down, then puts his whole head into the sand and plows it forward, twice, 3 times, scraping the bees off his face against the ground. Then he rolls onto his back and grinds his shoulders into it. Most of the cloud loses him within 400 yards because the marker is now buried in sand, and the bees are chasing a smell that is no longer on him. He eats the comb where he sits in about 20 minutes, stings still coming in 1s and 2s the entire time. By first light, his muzzle is thick, and his left eye is a slit. He will sleep in an old aardvark hole for most of the day, and he will be slower tomorrow night than he was last night. That is the real bill, not death. 2 days of reduced performance in an animal that has no fat reserve and cannot skip a night. A slower badger digs fewer holes, and fewer holes means he has to take the next risk sooner. And sometimes the bill is everything. Honey badgers are found dead at hives. It is uncommon and it is well documented. It happens when the clock runs against him instead of with him. A colony in an open cavity he cannot get his head out of quickly. A warm night with no temperature advantage. A nest he underestimated. A young animal that does not know when 11 minutes are up. A badger that stays 25 minutes does not walk away. The difference between the toughest animal out here and a dead one is a quarter of an hour. He is not immune to bees. He is on a timer, and he has learned how long it runs. Now turn it around, because the far more interesting question is why these bees are like this in the first place. Aggression is expensive. Every bee that stings him dies. Tonight, the colony will lose somewhere between 400 and 1,000 workers, which is a real cost paid in bodies. A colony that is calm keeps those workers and puts them on flowers. So the calm strategy should win. And across most of the world, it does. It does not win here. And the reason is standing in their nest with his head in the brood. Wherever nest predation is heavy and constant, the colonies that survive are the ones that respond in seconds, commit hundreds, and pursue. Wherever nest predation is rare, calm colonies do better because they waste nothing. African honeybees are not aggressive by temperament. They are the survivors of a place where something opens their nest on a regular basis, and they are shaped exactly like that pressure. He is not the only thing that raids them, but he is the one that comes at night, gets all the way in, and cannot be stopped by stings. Everything else can be driven off with pain. He is the one the pain does not work on. And a defense that cannot use pain has to use numbers, speed, and evacuation instead. The colony's personality is a portrait of an animal none of them will ever perceive as an animal. And it goes further than temperament. It decides where they live. A colony that nests in the open, on a branch, in a place like this, does not last a season. So wild colonies out here are in cavities, hollow trunks, rock crevices, holes in the ground, old termite mounds, anything with one small defensible entrance and a lot of material around it. Every one of those choices is a choice about diggers, and every one of them fails against him, because a small entrance means nothing to an animal whose main skill is making holes bigger. Which leaves them one last move, and they will use it.
An African colony that has been badly raided will abandon a good nest entirely. The queen stops laying, the colony consumes what honey it can carry, and within a few days the whole thing lifts off and travels, sometimes several miles, and starts again in a new cavity. Colonies elsewhere in the world almost never do this. Here it is standard procedure. Absconding is the most expensive thing a colony can do. They do it because staying is worse. It costs them the comb, the stores, and every larva they cannot carry. And a swarm that picks the wrong cavity in the dry season does not see the rains. Understand what he actually took out of that hollow. A piece of brood comb that size holds several thousand developing bees, and every one of them is a worker the colony was going to have in 3 weeks. A colony that loses honey loses fuel. A colony that loses brood loses its own future workforce, all at once, in one bite. The queen can lay 1,500 eggs a day, and she cannot lay at that rate without workers to feed the larvae. So the raid takes the labor that was going to replace the labor, and that is why one bad night decides a whole season. So count it out for both sides. He gained roughly a day and a half of protein in 11 minutes of work, which is the best exchange rate available to him anywhere on this landscape. He paid with 60 stings to the face, 2 days of swelling, and a slower night tomorrow. There is no other transaction on this landscape with that exchange rate, and there is no way to get it without putting his face into it. The colony lost several hundred workers, a large section of its brood, and most of a season's honey stores, and it will now spend everything it has left on moving. Nothing here was decided by courage or by anger. He has an armor with one gap and a clock he cannot see but has learned to obey.
They have a chemical that recruits, a temperature that betrays them, and a nest they can walk away from. Each one of them is the reason the other looks the way it does, and neither will ever know that. At dawn, there is a wax scent over that whole root plate, and the traffic starts. Ants come up the trunk in a column and work through the broken comb on the ground. A small brown bird lands on the split root, cuts into the exposed wax, and eats it, which almost nothing else out here can digest. That bird is a honey guide, and wax is close to the only thing it lives on. It cannot open a nest. It has no equipment for it, and it never will. Everything it eats because something with claws got there first, and it spends its life following the sound of digging. It was in the branches above this raid for the entire 11 minutes, and it did not make a sound while he was working. What he opened is now a resource for 6 or 7 species that could never have opened it themselves. Wasps come for the dead bees. A jackal will lick the split root for sugar tonight. The hollow itself is open now, and by the end of the month, something will be living in it, because a dry cavity with a wide entrance is valuable to almost everything out here. He did not open a nest. He opened a building, and the building will be occupied before the swelling in his face goes down. He did not intend a single one of them. He did not beat the hive. Nobody beats a hive. He agreed to a price and left before it went up. By 9 in the morning, he is asleep in an aardvark hole a mile north, face swollen, breathing through one nostril. By 9 in the morning, the colony has stopped feeding larvae, and the decision is already made, in no brain in particular. Both of them are running on the same 11 minutes, from opposite sides. In about 9 days, that colony will be in a rock crevice 2 miles east, in a cavity with a tighter entrance and a longer approach. And within a month, he will find it, because he covers this ground every night, and because a nest that size cannot hide a smell like that. He will wait for a cold hour, and the whole thing will run again, and both of them will do exactly what they did last time.